Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of flickering light, cold stone walls, and a kind of timekeeping so slow and quiet it might just lull you into the deepest sleep you've had all week. Picture this. You're wrapped in layers of wool, walking softly across a dark cloister floor. The air is scented faintly with beeswax and centuries-old stone. Somewhere, a bell tolls. Not because a monk looked at his iPhone, but because a candle finished melting through its sixth notch. Yep. Welcome to the weirdly soothing realm of medieval monks and their bedtime candles. And yes, spoiler alert, you probably wouldn't survive this schedule. But don't worry, you're not actually getting recruited into the order tonight, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love reading those. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward through the cold quiet of a medieval monastery. Your sandals scrape softly on the stone. You're not alone, though nobody speaks. It's the middle of the night, but technically, this is morning, at least for the monks who live here. They call it matins, the first of many prayer hours. And yes, they just woke up. The candles glow gently in alcoves along the walls, their flickering flames the only movement in the still dark. It's too early to feel human, but time doesn't care. Or at least, the candles don't. You sit on a narrow bench, spine already protesting. A chant begins low and rhythmic, like ocean waves slowed down to match your heartbeat. And even though you just woke up, part of your brain wonders how long until we get to sleep again. Sleep in this world is carved up like a ration. A few hours here, a nap there. Nothing long or indulgent. The monks aren't trying to be sleep deprived. They're just on God's clock. And God apparently didn't believe in 8-hour nights. Here's the thing you start noticing: time feels different here. There's no ticking, no alarms, no reminders, just the flame of a candle melting lower. You pass a monk who's been assigned candle duty. Yes, that's a real thing. He gently trims a wick, inspects a line marked in the wax, and gives the faintest nod. A bell will ring soon, because the candle says so. It's bizarrely comforting. This place doesn't just run on candles, it trusts them. Each stick of wax is like a silent, melty timekeeper, marked with black lines or brass pins, designed to burn at a consistent rate. Emphasis on designed. In practice, things are approximate. A breeze through a cracked window, that'll speed things up. A thicker wick. Now you're living in the future, but still, it works. Mostly, it's quiet, gentle, kind of poetic, really. You watch the flame tilt slightly, reacting to your breath. It makes you feel like time is breathing too. You move through the day or night. Who knows anymore, with an awareness of candle clocks everywhere. No ticking mechanisms. No sundials when it's cloudy. Just wax, flame, and patience. And patience is key. Candle clocks aren't exactly fast or precise. They were the medieval version of setting a timer and hoping it remembered what you told it. They didn't even tick, they just melted. Slowly, softly. If that doesn't sound like a sleep aid, I don't know what does. Historians still argue whether this kind of timekeeping started in monastic life or if monks just perfected it. Either way, it's a match made in sleepy heaven. Silence, ritual, and melting wax. Add a drizzle of Gregorian chant, and you've got yourself a bedtime ambiance playlist. Your day, or what little of it you can recognize, is shaped by these candles. They decide when prayers begin, when meals are taken, when you get to lie down again on your wooden bed with its hay-stuffed mattress. And honestly, you kind of love it. Even though you're sleep-deprived and cold, something about this place slows you down. There's no rush, no deadlines, just rhythm. You wander past a scriptorium, where a sleepy monk dips his quill in ink and blinks twice in the candlelight. He's copying a page of scripture, but his eyes flick toward the candle's next notch. He's counting minutes in wax. That's the only clock he trusts. We tend to think of medieval monks as always alert, always praying, always awake. But they were human, and sleep snuck in wherever it could. Between bells, during long prayers. Maybe right now, the monk beside you is dozing off mid-Ave Maria. Who could blame him? It's 3:30, Imam, and you've been up since... Well, who knows when? Time here isn't measured in hours, it's measured in flame. You eventually slip into your own nap. Just a little one. A head nod. A soft exhale. You dream of fireflies moving in slow circles, blinking out one by one. Maybe it's your brain trying to count candle notches. Maybe it's just the exhaustion. And in the dream, you feel that same sleepy peace, the kind that only comes when everything around you moves just a bit slower than normal. When the clock isn't ticking in your ear but melting, gently, in front of your eyes. A bell rings. Not loud, just firm. One long tone that pulls you back to stone walls and sandals and cold morning air. Another candle has finished burning. And that means it's time to move again. You rise groggily, joints stiff. As the bell fades into silence, there's no room for sluggishness here. The candle has spoken, and your next duty calls. Your stomach growls, but breakfast isn't coming just yet, not for a few more hours. Welcome to the reality of monastic life, a schedule so finely sliced and utterly alien that your modern circadian rhythm is currently filing a complaint. The structure of a monk's day, or more accurately, a monk's 24-hour orbit of exhaustion, is built around something called the divine office, a series of prayers scheduled throughout both day and night. It's broken into hours with names like matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline. If those sound like Hogwarts classes, don't worry, you're not the only one thinking it. Sadly, none involve potions, just chants, psalms, and very little sleep. The wildest part. Some of these hours occur in what you and your mattress would normally call deep REM territory. Matins, for example, could begin any time between midnight and 2 a.m., and it was the first mandatory awakening. After an hour or two of bleary-eyed chanting in the chapel, monks would retreat for a nap. But not too long, because Lauds was right around the corner, usually at dawn. So yes, if you're wondering, this means monks basically invented polyphasic sleep long before productivity YouTubers tried to hack it with 20-minute naps and cold showers. Monks lived it, breathed it, and probably sleepwalked through most of it. You trudge through the early morning chapel haze with the others, heads bowed, feet dragging, but then something shifts. A shaft of golden light pierces the gloom, hitting a dusty window and catching the edge of an ancient wooden lectern. For a moment, the glow seems warmer than it should be. It's not the sun, it's the candlelight, flickering just right. It bathes the room in something almost holy. A monk near you lets out a tiny sigh, barely audible, but unmistakably wistful. This is what they live for. Not just the prayers, not the rigid hours, but this strange, luminous quiet, the kind that only shows up when your body is too tired to be anxious. You're scheduled to help in the kitchen next, which you're told is an honor. It's mostly hauling firewood and watching barley stew try to boil over, but at least it's warmer in there. The candles in the kitchen are squat and smoky, made of animal fat tallow, to be precise. They burn dirtier than the sleek beeswax ones in the chapel. Still, they count time just the same. You watch one gutter and flicker, its flame wobbling dangerously as a draft sneaks under the door. And here's a lovely thought: if that candle goes out early, someone might miss the bell for sext. That's prayer at noon, by the way. Or close enough. These monks don't have wristwatches. They have melted wax and intuition. Back in the dormitory, you spot a younger monk curled sideways on his wooden bunk. His eyes are shut, lips murmuring a half prayer, half snore. He has exactly 47 minutes to nap before the next bell. He knows because he lit a marked candle on a nearby stone shelf. That candle will burn down to the third notch. When the flame reaches it, it'll hit a pin, which will fall with a soft plink into a small metal dish, his alarm clock. You find yourself weirdly admiring it. No beeping, no vibrating wrist strap, just a gentle plink and the smell of wax. Would it still work if the candle burned unevenly? Would the pin stick? Maybe. Historians still argue whether these candle clocks were actually reliable or more symbolic. But honestly, it's not like you've got other options. You lie down next to your borrowed candle, letting your eyelids drift lower as you count the seconds between wax strips. It's not an exact science, but it's something. It's enough. Some monks slept in full robes, boots still on, just in case they had to rise quickly. Others stripped down to tunics and wrapped up in woolen cloaks. Either way, no one was curling up with a memory foam pillow. You've got a straw-filled mattress and maybe a lice-resistant sheet if you're lucky. Still, sleep comes easily here. Something about the exhaustion, or maybe the fact that silence is practically a sacrament. Another bell. You're up again, back to the chapel. Another hour of chanting that feels half lucid, like humming in a dream. You begin to recognize the cycles, not just of prayer and waking, but of light. The sun has no authority here. The candles are king. They rule your sleep, your meals, your movement. You become attuned to them. You can almost sense when the wax has thinned, when a wick is about to drown in its own melted puddle. During a lull between tasks, you catch two monks exchanging a candle. It's a handoff that looks ceremonial, but it's just practical. The old one burned too fast last night. They suspect the wick was faulty, or maybe the wax had too much resin. Either way, it messed with the timing of Compline. The final prayer before the longest sleep you'll get all day, roughly 4 hours. A luxury. You overhear one monk mumble, "Better than last week." Apparently, a gust of wind blew out half the candles during matins and nobody knew when to stop. They chanted straight into lauds. Oops. And yet, no one's angry. There's a shrugging acceptance, a kind of sleepy grace. Here, errors in time aren't disasters, they're just reminders that flame is fallible. That control is an illusion. You close your eyes again later that evening, not to sleep, but just to rest. You're sitting in the chapel after Vespers, the candles glowing soft gold against the old stone. And for once, you're not counting the minutes. You're just breathing, listening to the flutter of wax and wick. You don't need a digital display to know what time it is. You just need the candle. Another candle is lit. Not just lit, ritualized. A monk cradles it like a holy relic, shielding the flicker from an invisible breeze. You're standing behind him, half watching, half hypnotized. He lowers the stub of last night's candle into a sand-filled tray and gently sets the fresh one into a brass holder. It's plain, unadorned, with hand-scratched markings along the shaft. He lights the wick, steps back, and nods. The candle now holds authority over the next prayer hour. You're starting to understand monks didn't just use candles to light the way they obeyed them. This isn't ambiance. This is administration. The air smells of wax and wood smoke, like old books exhaling. You watch the new candle settle into its rhythm flame calm, wick upright, no sputtering, a good omen, or at least a less annoying morning. If the candle burns evenly, your next bell will come on time. If not, you might end up 20 minutes early for confession. And as you've learned, 20 minutes early to confession just means 20 more minutes to remember all the reasons you're there. It seems strange, maybe even lazy, that so much of monastic scheduling rested on melting wax. But time wasn't measured in seconds back then. It was measured in tasks completed, prayers recited, and how many notches the wax had passed. And the candles themselves. They weren't just your average drugstore emergency backups. These things were custom built. Some monasteries even had a dedicated brother luminarum, if you can believe it, whose whole job was managing time via flame. He'd trim wicks, pour molds, and experiment with additives to get the cleanest, slowest, most predictable burn. You walk with him now, through a storage room that smells deeply of beeswax and soot. He shows you racks of cooling candles, each one with tiny pins inserted at calculated intervals. When the wax melts past the pin, It drops. The sound is soft but definite. That's the cue for someone to ring a bell or start preparing the next psalm. It's delightfully analog. If this monastery had a slogan, it might be, "We don't do digital, we do drippy." But here's where it gets oddly clever. They didn't just burn candles straight down. Sometimes they'd embed bells directly into the wax, with tiny mechanisms rigged to chime as the melt reached certain points, or they'd string cords across the candle, so that when the flame burned through the thread, a small weight would drop clanging against a metal tray or yanking a rope in another room. Low-tech, but alarmingly effective. If you're picturing a medieval version of a Rube Goldberg machine, you're not far off. Historians still argue whether some of these setups were practical or just symbolic performances of orderliness. Were the monks really relying on those waxy inventions, or were they more like spiritual fidget toys, a way to show devotion through craft? Either way, you can't deny the artistry. And the devotion. In one corner of the candle room, you spot a strange little experiment, a candle half dipped in lavender oil. Brother Luminarum tells you, quietly, that a few monks believe certain scents help with wakefulness or sleep. Depending on which hour you're trying to stay conscious for, you ask if it works. He shrugs. Only if you believe it. Fair enough. You're sent to help prepare for prime next. It's the first daytime prayer hour. Morning has broken, but just barely. There's a cold grayness outside, like the sky hasn't quite woken up yet. You walk down a narrow hall where wall sconces hold short, stubby candles that burn faster intentionally. You're told, because these are for short tasks. Even candle choice was strategic. Long prayers got the slow burn. Quick tasks, faster flames. You pass a monk who seems to be gauging the wax level with a slightly panicked expression. He's in charge of timing breakfast and looks like someone who's 5 minutes late to flip pancakes. You offer to help. He gives you a nod of thanks and points to a tray of marked stubs. Each one is labeled in Latin. You pretend to understand. By now, your brain is wired to read wax like a sundial. You can feel when the hour is turning, even if the candle hasn't set it yet. And when it does, when the wax kisses that next little brass pin and sends it clink into its dish, you feel a thrill. Not because something big is about to happen, but because something has happened exactly as expected. There's peace in that. Outside, the sky shifts from gray to blue. You watch the monks file into the chapel, all eyes flicking briefly to the central candle as they pass. It's burned about an inch since matins. The next notch is just visible, like a horizon line creeping into view. You find your seat. You sit. You breathe. You don't worry about what time it is. You don't need to. The candle knows. And for now, that's enough. You sit cross-legged on a cold stone bench, eyes fixed on a candle that's only slightly taller than your hand. At first glance, it looks like any ordinary wax stick, but now you see the markings, delicate lines etched in regular intervals, almost like a measuring cup. These aren't for decoration. They're time, literal hours, carved into something flammable. This, you learn, is a candle clock, a concept so simple and strange that it almost makes you laugh. But it works. Mostly. In a world without watches, phones, or that one loud guy with a grandfather clock, monks used candles with notches, pins, or inked segments to track time. You light the top, and as the candle melts down, the flame eventually reaches each mark. And when it does, something happens. A bell, a drop, a whisper of duty in the stillness. You try it yourself. You're given a practice candle shorter with wider spacing between the markings. You light it and sit, waiting, watching. The flame dances gently. Wax pools at the base, catching in a brass tray. You find your breath sinking with the flicker, slower, slower still. The first notch begins to soften. A tiny pin wobbles, then falls with a soft metallic ting. Your first hour has passed. You've just earned your candle badge. But candle clocks weren't exactly plug and play. Monks had to account for wick size, wax density, ambient temperature, and whether Brother Matthew forgot to shut the kitchen door again, letting the draft mess everything up. Some candles burned faster if the wax was too soft. Others stalled out if the wick curled into itself. A candle clock was only as reliable as the guy who made it and the weather. Also mice. They liked wax. Unrelated, maybe, but annoying nonetheless. Still, it was revolutionary. Candle clocks gave monks a portable, silent, adjustable way to regulate their sacred rhythms. They could carry them from room to room, pray in total darkness, and still know exactly when to switch from Psalm 38 to Psalm 39. Assuming the candle cooperated, you're shown one of the older candle clocks kept in a wooden box, wrapped in linen. This one is engraved with hours in Roman numerals and has notches colored with ash, so they stand out, a little crude, but functional. You realize monks weren't just spiritual, many were engineers in wool robes. When the sun couldn't be trusted, and mechanical clocks were rare or laughably expensive, wax stepped in as the ultimate lo-fi hero. Historians still argue whether the idea originated in monasteries or earlier in places like China and the Islamic world. There's mention of candle clocks in 6th century China, complete with scent layers that released different smells as the wax melted like an ancient form of mood lighting crossed with aromatherapy. Whether monks borrowed the idea or invented their own, they ran with it, and they got weirdly good at it. Your own candle is halfway down now. You glance at the next notch, maybe 10 minutes. You lie back on a wooden bench and listen to the gentle hiss of flame and melting wax. A nearby monk walks past with a small brass dish, checking for pins. He pauses beside yours and raises an eyebrow of approval. "Good burn," he says softly. You feel strangely proud, as if you've passed a hidden test. You ask if all monks used candle clocks. He chuckles. "No, some just guessed." You blink. Guessed some brothers just watched the light or listened for crows. Others had good instincts. Candle clocks were mostly for the precise type. You file that under the monks I would not want to copy from during math class. Still, the idea catches on with you. There's something satisfying about time that melts instead of ticks. Something softer, more forgiving. If the candle burned a little fast today, well, maybe the prayers came early. Maybe God likes a surprise. You think of how your world counts time alarms, reminders, timers that yell. You think of how a candle just fades, quietly, giving you permission to stop whatever you're doing and move gently to the next thing. It's not about productivity. It's about rhythm. You help replace an old candle in the infirmary later, where one of the older monks sleeps fitfully. They don't use bells here, just candle clocks with strings. When the wax burns through, the string breaks. A soft pull lifts a curtain, and sunlight falls gently on the sleeper's face. That's his wake-up call. No sound. Just light. You could get used to that. Later, in the scriptorium, you notice that the candle clocks burn cleaner here, Brother Luminarum's special beeswax batch. Probably. They're marked with ink and tiny brass bands, less messy than pins. The copyists work by them in silence, only pausing when a band clinks into a clay cup or a monk sighs and stretches. The rhythm is precise, but never frantic. You find yourself using candle clocks for everything, a short burn for rest, a medium one for kitchen work, a tall one for prayers. It becomes second nature. You stop asking how long and start asking how much wax. Your final task of the day is to light the Compline candle. It's thick and solemn, made for the last prayers before the longest rest. It's marked with 4 notches, each one a checkpoint in the ritual. You light it, you bow, you walk away, and as you do, the flame behind you begins its gentle countdown towards sleep. There's something satisfying about it, you think, knowing that while you drift, something is still keeping time, quietly, softly, without judgment. Just a little candle, doing its thing, telling you when to rest. You're back with Brother Luminarum, and this time he's grinning like he's about to show you a magic trick. He leads you to a cramped side room, part workshop, part laboratory, part fire hazard, and gestures proudly at a cluttered work table. It's covered with stubby candles, bits of twine, slivers of brass, and something that might be dried rosemary, or possibly leftover soup. "Welcome," he whispers, "to the future of monk time." You raise an eyebrow, but he's already reaching for a half-burned candle embedded with tiny metal balls. "This one's special," he says. Weighted pins fall with a louder clink, wakes up even Brother Matthias, and he once slept through a thunderstorm and a fox attack. You lean in. The candle is notched like the others, but these markings aren't drawn, they're pressed into the wax like tiny braille bumps. It looks more like a science project than a spiritual aid, but it's beautiful in a weird, chaotic way, and it's only the beginning. Turns out, monks weren't just praying by candlelight, they were engineering with it. Over time, they developed clever, sometimes downright ridiculous ways to make their candles do things. You learn about thread-burn alarms, candles wrapped in a single hair-thin thread that, once burned through, would release a weight and ding a bell like a monastic Rube Goldberg. Scented stages, a trick borrowed from the East, where different layers of scented wax released distinct smells as they melted. Lavender meant time for evening prayers. Myrrh meant wake up. Cinnamon, no one's sure, but Brother Stephen once swore it meant run. Light cues candles tinted with dark wax in sections, which changed the hue of the flame. It's subtle, but in the right conditions. A monk could see when the flame turned slightly orange and know his nap was up. Historians still argue whether these candle hacks were widespread or just the results of a few creative orders with too much time and beeswax. But the ingenuity is undeniable. You get to try one yourself. Brother Luminarum gives you a test candle wrapped with 3 threads. The idea is this: each thread burns at a slightly different rate. When the top one breaks, it drops a small pebble into a bowl. That's your cue to stir the soup pot. When the second thread breaks, it triggers a weight to pull open the shutter. Sunlight floods in. By the time the third thread burns, it'll be time for prayers. You light it and wait. The first pebble drops with a soft plonk. You smile. It worked. Then the second thread breaks faster than expected. Clang. The shutter flies open dramatically and startles Brother Felix in the corridor. He spills his ink and mutters something unholy. You pretend not to notice. You turn to Brother Luminarum. Was that supposed to happen? He shrugs. More or less. This is how life unfolds here. Not precisely, not rigidly, but with rhythm, with intention. The candles don't force obedience, they invite it. You start to see them as companions. Gentle reminders, not digital tyrants. Even when they misbehave, they do it softly. Later that afternoon, a monk calls you over to a windowsill where a smaller, stranger candle sits inside a bowl of water. For night storms, he says. The reflection in the water doubles the light. You blink. Clever. He nods. Also floats. If the candle gets knocked over, it won't set the scriptorium on fire. Ah yes, the ever-present fear of fire. More on that later. But for now, you admire the ingenuity. You sit beside the water candle and watch the reflection tremble slightly in the surface. It feels like time is rippling rather than ticking. You start to feel sleepy again, probably, because every third monk you meet talks like a walking melatonin supplement. The calm, the quiet, the firelit air. It's all conspiring against your alertness. One monk jokes, if we added chamomile to the wax, we'd never wake up. He's probably not wrong. Eventually, you're assigned a slightly more complex candle, one designed to mark 90 minutes, with 3 pins, each spaced evenly apart. You light it before Vespers and are told to observe. As each pin drops, it gives you a checkpoint. The first clink comes after 30 minutes. You're reading a psalm and barely notice it, but it reassures you. The second pin takes longer. You're deep in the rhythm of copying a page, eyes burning slightly, when it tinks to the floor. The final pin falls near the end of the prayer session. A perfect match. You feel something swell in your chest. Not pride exactly, just a warm recognition. The candle worked. The timing aligned. You did something the same way a monk would have 800 years ago. And for once, you didn't mess it up. You extinguish the candle carefully, cupping the flame, and carry the stub to the disposal jar. Even burnt wax is reused here, melted down, reformed, reborn. Kind of like you. In a sleepy, metaphorical way, you sit in your cot, wrapped in a woolen blanket that smells faintly of smoke and sheep. The air is cold. The stone beneath you colder still, but it doesn't matter because you're not sleeping yet. You're watching the candle you lit moments ago, watching the wax slip and slump ever so slowly down the stick. This one's marked with 5 shallow notches, spaced with care. You're told that by the time the flame reaches the 3rd, you're allowed to lie down. Not before. That's the rule. And rules matter here. They shape your day. They tell you when to wake, when to eat, when to chant, when to sleep. Or in this case, nap. But the candle is stubborn. The flame burns a little slower than usual tonight. Maybe because of the damp air, or maybe because the wax was overmixed. Whatever the reason, your nap is delayed. You stare at that 3rd notch like it owes you something. You try not to sigh too loudly. The monk in the cot beside you has already passed the 3rd notch on his candle and is curled peacefully, lips parted, possibly dreaming about bread. You're just stuck in this medieval purgatory of pre-nap limbo. Still, you can't help but marvel at the discipline it takes. Not just to wake up before dawn or to chant for hours, but to wait to sleep until a candle allows it. Modern, you would have slammed the snooze button 15 minutes ago and crawled under a duvet. But here, you wait. Not because you're being watched, but because that's the rhythm. You don't break it. You follow it. The flame creeps lower. You count wax drips now instead of seconds. Every tiny slump of melted wax feels like progress. You hum a psalm under your breath. Quiet, patient, monastic. If your family could see you now, they'd probably assume you hit your head. Finally, the flame reaches the 3rd notch. It takes a second for the wax to give way, and then plink. A pin falls into a small clay bowl beneath the holder. That's your cue. You don't leap into bed. That would be vulgar. You ease down slowly, with the reverence of someone entering a sacred ritual. And in a way, this nap will last about 90 minutes, give or take. After that, another candle will call you back to duty. But for now, your eyes close, and your body gives in to the kind of fatigue that only comes from waking up 3 times before sunrise. The sleep is deep, strange, dreamless. When the waking comes, it's not from sound, it's from light. A soft glow through your eyelids. The wax has reached the final notch. You didn't even hear the bell or the pin, but your body knows. The timing seeps into your bones. You sit up, groggy, yes, but in tune. The strange thing is you don't feel cheated. 90 minutes of rest feels like a gift here, like your body has adapted to this drip-fed slumber, and somehow it works. No binge sleeping. No long Sunday lie-ins, just doses scheduled by flame. Historians still argue whether this kind of segmented rest was healthy. Some think it matched our natural sleep rhythms better than the 8-hour block modern life demands. Others argue it caused chronic exhaustion that monks simply spiritualized as holy fatigue. Either way, you're living it now and you're oddly okay with it. You join a small group for the next prayer hour. A few monks look freshly rested. One looks like he accidentally napped face down in a psalter. You've been there. The candle for this session is a slender one. Shorter, a half-hour stick, as they call it. It's already halfway through by the time you sit. The room is dim, quiet except for the soft drone of chanting. The light from the candle hits the high arches and dances in the rafters. It doesn't just illuminate, it marks time. You close your eyes for a second, not to sleep, just to settle. And in that flickering dark, you remember something you've stopped wondering what hour it is. That realization hits gently. You've been living candle to candle for days now, maybe more, and you no longer check the sun or guess the time in your head. You just wait for the flame to fall. It's peaceful. Strangely so, even when it doesn't go as planned. Later that night, during your second nap attempt, Your candle sputters out halfway down. The wick drowns in its own wax, the flame gasping once, then vanishing. No pin drops, no signal, no bell. You blink awake in the dark, confused. For a second, you wonder if you overslept. Then you see the candle dead, misshapen, useless. You wait. Eventually, a sleepy monk stumbles in to relight it. He doesn't scold you. He just says, "Bad batch," and replaces the candle with a fresh one. The new flame flickers to life, and time begins again. You learn an important lesson that night, even here, where order rules and wax marks every motion. Nothing's perfect. Timing slips. Flames fail. Schedules bend. And it's okay. You still sleep. You still wake. You still follow the rhythm, even when it drips a little offbeat. You return to your cot after a midnight psalm, shivering slightly, wool cloak wrapped tight around your shoulders. There's no fire in the dormitory, too risky, just rows of wooden beds, straw-filled mattresses, and the dim glow of a few stubborn candles along the walls. You slide under your blanket, if it can be called that. It's more like a glorified rug that itches and smells like wet barn. Still, you're tired enough to sleep standing, and the thought of lying down even on a plank is pure luxury. And this time, there's no candle to wait for. Your assigned rest period is clear. You get a solid block of sleep. 4 hours. Not exactly a spa weekend, but compared to your naplet from earlier, it's a gift. You stretch out on your board-like bed, feeling every knot in the wood, every pebble beneath your mat. Some monks slept directly on the floor to avoid the temptation of comfort. You, however, are feeling deeply tempted to clutch your lumpy straw pillow like a stuffed animal and never let go. The room is quiet, save for a few sniffling noses and a soft murmur, some monk praying himself to sleep. You breathe in, then out, slowly, trying to let the silence wrap around you. And soon, it does. Your dreams are weird, as always. Monks chanting in reverse, candles dripping upward, a cow with a halo trying to sell you an hourglass. Standard medieval dreamscape. You wake up later to the faint sound of a bell and the smell of damp wool. You stretch your neck, joints clicking like old door hinges. And then you remember this is the longest rest you'll get all day. It makes you grateful. You shuffle over to the washing station, just a basin of icy water, and splash your face. There are no heated towels here, no herbal soaps, just discipline and occasional frostbite. One monk next to you yawns so hard you're worried he'll dislocate his jaw. "Blessed be the nap," he mumbles. "Amen?" You towel off, pull your robe tight, and head back toward the scriptorium, where you've been helping copy old texts under the watch of a monk whose entire personality is frowning. The candles here burn longer and brighter beeswax, obviously reserved for important tasks. One of them is nearly burned to the base, wax pooling like honey around its holder. It's marked with 5 clean lines. 4 are already melted past. You glance at the last one, almost there. You whisper, 10 minutes, and begin your work. You settle onto a bench and begin tracing letters, careful not to smear the ink. Outside, the wind howls like an unpaid banshee. Inside, the flame dances, steady and warm. It's one of the few comforts you get in this chilly, rigid place. Your back begins to ache, your hand cramping, but you press on. Not because you're zealous, but because you know that when the final mark is reached and the pin drops, your break begins. It's your new religion, do your task until the candle says stop. A small indulgence, you place your hand near the candle. The warmth is faint but real. It's a comfort, not one you voice. Of course, a monk publicly enjoying warmth is practically scandalous. That's the strange beauty of this life. Luxury is forbidden, but there's still room for tiny kindnesses. A shared loaf of warm bread, a soft candle in a cold cell, a moment of silence that lingers just long enough to let your soul exhale. Historians still argue whether these harsh living conditions were about discipline or if they were just the result of lack. Did monks embrace poverty to imitate Christ, or was it just because mattresses were expensive? Probably a little of both. Either way, you're living it, one itchy blanket at a time. Later that day, during Compline, the final prayer before your long sleep, you find yourself zoning out mid-chant. You catch yourself listing all the noises you've learned to sleep through: bells, coughs, snoring, shuffling sandals, the occasional candle topple, and once, memorably, a small bat. The chanting ends. The monks rise. You file silently back to the dormitory. Tonight, Brother Luminarum surprises you with something rare, a freshly made pillow. It's still rough, stuffed with clean straw, but it smells faintly of sage. He winks. For good dreams. You almost tear up, but you don't. You're a monk now. Or at least, you're playing one convincingly. You lie down. The new pillow crackles slightly beneath your head, but it's heavenly. You position your personal candle on the shelf by your cot, unlit this time. Just watching it is enough. It reminds you that even in the darkness, time is still moving gently forward. You turn onto your side, blanket tucked to your chin, and sigh. No alarms, no ticking clocks, just your body, your breath, and the remembered sound of wax dripping down a candle in the dark. Sleep takes you before you can even whisper goodnight. You wake up to smoke. Not the choking, panic-inducing kind, just a faint, meandering thread in the air, curling upward like a lazy question mark. It leads you to a candle that's behaving badly. The wick's too short. The flame stutters, hissing and spitting, tilting to one side like it's had a few too many sips of beeswax. The wax pools unevenly, bubbling at one edge while the other remains strangely solid. You frown. This isn't how candle clocks are supposed to behave. A monk hurries over, robes flapping slightly as he lifts the offending candle and inspects it with narrowed eyes. Unbalanced pour. He mutters, too much resin, and probably too close to the door. He's right. There's a draft. Someone forgot to latch the west window again. And now the schedule is 20 minutes behind or ahead. Honestly, you're not sure anymore. That's the thing with candles. They're beautiful, but they lie. Well, they drift from the truth, which is basically the same thing when you're trying to time an entire abbey's prayers. You sit in the refectory, chewing on a dense wedge of bread that could legally be classified as a medieval blunt weapon, thinking about how fragile the system really is. A bit of wind, a flawed wick, a candle that burns unevenly, any of it can knock the whole rhythm off balance. And yet, somehow, it works. Most of the time. Still, you're starting to see why the monks built redundancies into their world. There are always backup candles. 2 bells instead of 1. More than one monk watching the wax. And in worst-case scenarios, guesswork. Worst I've seen, one monk tells you as you help him rearrange candles after lunch, was when the candles were made with old wax twice melted. Burned fast and crooked. We had vespers at what must have been 3 in the afternoon. Confused everyone. One brother was halfway through his porridge when we started lauds. You laugh, softly. And what happened? We pretended it was on purpose, he says. Divine miscalculation. You start noticing these little wobbles more often. The candle in the scriptorium that leans a little to the left, burning the hours asymmetrically. The one in the chapel that flares too bright, making everyone look suspiciously awake. The one in the latrine chamber, yes. Even monks need a candle there that sputters out halfway through someone's scheduled turn. It makes you wonder how many misfired candles led to misaligned prayers, missed naps, maybe even arguments. Historians still argue whether candle clocks were ever precise enough for real timekeeping or if they were more symbolic, a representation of the passage of time rather than an accurate measurement. Some claim the monks didn't need precision, just structure, enough rhythm to hold the day together, even if the beat occasionally skipped. You experience this firsthand one evening, when your assigned candle set to mark the first half of Vespers burns way too fast. You watch it nervously as it zips past the second notch. You're still on the 5th psalm, but the pin's about to drop. And then it does clink. One of the monks hears it and assumes time's up. He rises, begins to chant the closing verse. The others hesitate, exchange glances, then follow. You glance at the candle again. It's only halfway down, but it's burned through 3 notches already. You silently apologize to God for letting your candle lie. After prayers, Brother Luminarum inspects the stub and confirms your suspicion: faulty wick. Too thick, drew too much heat. He sighs, then claps your shoulder. Could have been worse. Last month one exploded. Your eyes widen, well flared. Spattered wax, hit Brother Simeon's ear. He took it as a sign. Of what? No one knows. Probably something solemn. Still, even with all its faults, the candle clock remains king. There's something poetic about trusting something so imperfect to tell you when to rest, when to rise, when to eat. Because that's life, isn't it? A little uneven, a little smoky, a bit behind or ahead, but still moving forward. One night, you sit in your cot, watching your own candle. You've adjusted its position, shielded from the wind, wick trimmed just right. It's burning beautifully. The light glows soft and golden, like a blessing. But something feels strange. It's too quiet. You glance around and realize the bell hasn't rung. The pin hasn't dropped. You lean in. The wax has melted past the notch, but the pin is stuck half sunk, half floating, resting stubbornly against a ridge of unmelted wax. You sigh, stand up, and tap the base of the holder. Plink! There it goes. Right on time. Sort of. You return to bed smiling. Sometimes even the candle needs a little help. The first time you see the mechanical clock, it feels loud. Not in sound, though it does tick. Faintly, but in presence. You spot it in a rival abbey down the valley. A wealthier one, where the stone walls are cleaner and the bread doesn't chip your molars. The monks there walk a little straighter, and their habits look slightly less mended. And in the center of their courtyard stands the marvel, a tower clock. You crane your neck to look up. There's no face, no hands pointing to numbered hours. Just a bell in the tower, and inside, a gear-filled contraption that turns it at fixed intervals, ringing out the canonical hours with zero need for wax, wind, or whimsy. It runs on weights and wheels. The monk showing you says, clearly proud, regulated with a verge escapement mechanism. You nod as if that means anything. The candle clocks back home feel like cozy old cats compared to this ticking beast. This clock is unapologetically practical. It doesn't flicker, doesn't shift its mood with the wind, doesn't lull you to sleep with gentle glow. It simply is fixed, mechanical, exact, and a little soulless. You think so, but the monks here adore it. They speak of how it's made prayer more punctual, reduced confusion, ended debates over, did the candle reach the 3rd notch, or are you just tired? They trust the tick. You're not convinced. It tolls the hour while you're visiting a deep bong that echoes down the stone corridors. It's louder than the candle pins, more certain. It demands action. There's no softness, no ambiguity, just a booming declaration that the next task must begin. You find yourself missing the warm uncertainty of wax. Back at your own monastery, you mention the mechanical clock to Brother Luminarum. He chuckles, patting a pot of freshly melted beeswax. We had one once. Briefly, years ago. Your eyebrows lift. Really? Oh, yes. Donated by a wealthy noble. Big bronze gears, wood case, made noise like a haunted chicken coop, and broke in 3 weeks. No one knew how to fix it. We melted the bell down into candle holders. You smile. That feels right. Historians still argue whether medieval monks resisted mechanical clocks for spiritual reasons or simply because they were expensive and temperamental. Some claim monks preferred the gentle guidance of natural time candle, sun, body, because it kept them humble. Others think they were just practical. Why pay a fortune for something bees and pins could already do? You suspect it's both. The candle isn't just a tool, it's a metaphor. Time that melts, that changes, that requires tending. A clock ticks at you. A candle moves with you. Still, curiosity lingers. You spend an afternoon reading one of the abbey's copied texts, an early treatise on horology, written by someone who clearly adored gears. Diagrams of wheels and weights, careful notations on pendulums, as if the author thought God lived in the gears themselves. You close the book and stare at the candle burning on the desk. It has one notch remaining. You already know the sound it'll make when the pin falls. You know the pace, the glow, and you realize for all the precision the mechanical clock boasts, it doesn't teach patience. The candle does. It requires you to be with it, to sit, to notice, to wait. You imagine monks in a century or two, ones who will grow up with mechanical clocks chiming every hour on the dot. They'll never sit in silence, wondering if the wax will drip past the next notch before sleep claims them. They'll never listen for the faint clink of a pin. Will they feel more structured? Maybe. But will they understand slowness the same way you're not sure? Later that night, during Compline, you find yourself timing your prayers with the candle again. There's no bell this time, just the flame. You trust it. You trust yourself with it. The idea of perfect timekeeping has started to feel silly, because what does it matter if your prayer starts exactly at 6:00 if your heart isn't ready? What's the point of waking at precisely 4:00 a.m.? If your spirit is stuck in dreams, the candle gives grace. It drifts. It adjusts. And when the wind blows too hard and snuffs it out early, you simply relight it. The pin drops late. You were watching it, eyes half-lidded, drifting gently between candle flame and psalm, but it hesitated. The wax had pooled unevenly, forming a lip that held the pin just above its tipping point. It should have fallen 5 minutes ago, maybe more. Now everyone's confused. Half the choir finishes the final verse. The other half, still expecting another round, sings over them. The harmony unravels like a rope in slow motion. You hear one monk cough into his sleeve to cover a laugh. Another mutters, "Blessed be the candle's sense of humor." This isn't unusual, because for all their discipline, monks lived under constant threat of time-related accidents, and not just from wax, from themselves. You're told the story of Brother Theobald, a sleepy monk from the southern cloister who once nodded off mid-matins, face planted on the cold stone floor. When the candle reached its pin, it plinked into his water bowl. The splash woke him. He screamed. Everyone else screamed. Then the abbot screamed. They added face positioning awareness to the next week's lesson plan. You learn quickly the consequences of mistimed sleep are rarely severe but always awkward. Miss the start of terce, and you get kitchen duty. Miss the second psalm of Laud's latrine detail. Miss 2 prayer hours in a row confession, and you scrub wax out of candlestick trays. You try not to complain. Confession here is oddly relaxing. The monk assigned to hear yours sounds half asleep most days. You confess you mentally ranked the abbey's bread bakers by attractiveness. He nods. Relatable? Still, sleeping through your candle alarm carries weight, especially if it becomes a habit. One brother famously missed a whole day's cycle after using a faulty tallow candle. His nap was meant to last 30 minutes. It lasted 10 hours. He awoke in the infirmary, convinced he'd slept into Judgment Day. After that, the monks quietly instituted nap monitors. It's as grim as it sounds. A designated monk watches for candle errors during scheduled rests. If the candle misbehaves, burns unevenly, snuffs itself out, or skips a pin, he gently shakes the sleeper and offers a reset. You do this job once. It's oddly satisfying, like being a guardian of dreams. You watch over the candles and the sleepers, hovering in that calm, flickering space between wakefulness and prayer. You only have to tap one monk awake, Brother Giles, whose candle refused to drop its pin no matter how obediently it burned. He mumbles thanks and rolls over. You whisper, "Try beeswax next time." And this is where you really start to feel it. The candle isn't just a timer, it's a companion, a culprit, sometimes a scapegoat. Brother Thomas blames his missed sext hour on a faulty wick. The wick blames the wax blames the draft blames the cracked stone wall that's older than France. Historians still argue whether monks genuinely trusted their candles, or whether they secretly used them as convenient excuses. I would have made it to Prime, but my wax slouched. A classic line. And then there's the matter of penance. Not all mistakes are forgiven with a wink. You get caught once, late to Vespers. Your candle burned too slowly. It happens. The abbot doesn't yell, he simply assigns you to sweep the cloister by moonlight. And yes, the broom is worse than the floor. Still, punishment here isn't cruel. It's just corrective, a gentle nudge. A reminder that even though time flows unevenly, commitment should remain steady. That night, as you sweep under the stars, you carry a stubby little candle. No markings, just raw light to guide your steps. And something about it feels honest. You start thinking about how many monks across history did this exact thing, paste the stones with a candle stub. Cleaning, correcting, reflecting. It feels ancient, sacred. Even, you whisper a psalm under your breath. Not because the candle tells you to, because you want to. The air smells sweet, not cloying like perfume, not sharp like incense, just faintly floral, with a hint of something earthy beneath. You follow your nose toward the chapel, where Brother Luminarum is melting down a fresh batch of wax. But this isn't just any wax. It's beeswax. Golden, smooth, almost buttery. And oh, so much better than the tallow you've grown used to. You know tallow. You've smelled it, lived it. It's what fills the dormitory, the kitchen, and, regrettably, the privy candles. Made from rendered animal fat, mostly beef or mutton, it burns with a soft, greasy flame and a scent that lands somewhere between barnyard nostalgia and what died in the rafters. But beeswax, that's something else entirely. The richer monasteries used it exclusively, not just because it burned brighter and longer, but because it was a status symbol, a golden flame for golden coffers. You run your fingers along a hardened stick of it. It's heavier than tallow, doesn't crumble, and it smells clean. Queen's wax, Brother Luminarum says with a grin, fit for God, or at least for someone who can afford bees. You help him pour a new mold. The wax flows thick and slow, like honey with a secret. He sprinkles in a few crushed herbs, lavender, sage, maybe thyme. For sleep candles, he explains. Smells soothe. Keep the mind still. You raise an eyebrow. Medieval aromatherapy. He shrugs. We call it monk science. You learn that the type of wax didn't just affect scent and status. It changed everything, the way the candle burned, the shape of the flame, even how quickly time seemed to pass. Beeswax burned cleanly and evenly, which made it ideal for accurate candle clocks. Tallow, on the other hand, dripped erratically, smoked like a moody teenager, and shortened your lifespan by at least 2 candle sniffs. Historians still debate how widespread beeswax candles really were. Some say only elite monasteries could afford them regularly. Others argue monks maintained their own apiaries and used beeswax as a treat or reward. One thing's for sure, when a beeswax candle was lit, you knew someone important was about to speak or sneeze. You remember a story Brother Felix told you about a monk who hoarded beeswax under his bed, shaving slices off at night to make personal candles. When discovered, he was reassigned to tallow-only duties for a full season. Smelled like penance, Felix said. Deadpan. You get your own beeswax candle the next evening, your reward for assisting with the mold pour. It's short, marked with 3 shallow lines and topped with a perfectly trimmed wick. You light it reverently, like you're christening a ship. The flame is steady, bright, no smoke. You almost forget it's melting. As you sit near it, reading psalms in a low whisper, you notice your thoughts slowing. Not because you're bored, but because the candle doesn't rush you. It feels like it's burning time with a little more dignity. And here's something unexpected: beeswax doesn't warp from drafts as easily. Your flame barely moves, even as the wind whistles through the ancient window frames. You watch it like a campfire, hypnotized by its certainty. It feels reliable in a way that even your most trusted tallow candles never managed. You find out later that beeswax was sometimes mixed with other ingredients, resins, spices, even ash to alter the timing, too. Some monks kept private formulas, passed down like treasured family recipes. 3 parts wax, 1 part pine sap. Stir counterclockwise, don't blink. Brother Luminarum shows you one labeled Vigilo Nocte, I keep watch at night. It's designed to burn bright and long for vigil prayers and solitary meditations. Another is called Brevis Somnus Short Sleep, a quick nap candle rigged with a fast-burning wick to give you just enough rest between bells. You marvel at how personal these wax sticks could be. Not just mass-produced time torches, but customized tools, tailored experiences. You walk the cloister with your beeswax candle later that night, feeling vaguely royal. It doesn't sputter, doesn't weep, just glows. And you realize candles here don't just tell time, they carry it. Like a secret, like a rhythm in flame. Time, in this world, doesn't march forward. It melts. And sometimes, it smells faintly of lavender. The flame leans suddenly left, casting a long shadow on the chapel wall. It's subtle at first, a flicker, a low hiss, but you notice, and so does Brother Luminarum, who stiffens beside you, eyes flicking toward the wooden beams overhead. You both feel it at once. The fear, not of sin or starvation or sleep deprivation. Fire. There's a reason every monk in this abbey is trained in flame control. Not just candle making, but extinguishing, isolating, relocating. Because in a monastery built of wood and ancient stone, one wayward candle could turn centuries of prayer and hand-copied scripture into a glowing ash pile faster than you can chant Kyrie Eleison. You learn that every monk has his own extinguishing cloth, a folded strip of damp linen kept close, even during prayers. Some keep them tucked in their sleeves. Others loop them through their belts like monastic firefighters. Candlelight is holy, Brother Felix tells you, but holiness spreads. He doesn't need to finish the sentence. You've heard stories. Everyone here has, like the abbey in Normandy, whose entire north wing went up one spring night after a candle rolled off a table and into a basket of wool cloaks. Or the priory in York, where a gust of wind turned a humble compline candle into a spiraling tower of flame that devoured 3 rooms before dawn. Historians still argue whether these fires were rare accidents or frighteningly common. Some believe candle control was a full-time responsibility in larger monasteries equal to cooking or copying texts. Others think the fear of fire was so baked into monastic routine that it didn't need special designation. Everyone knew. Everyone watched the flame. You certainly do now. From that day on, you walk with your thumb gently resting on the rim of your candle holder, ready to pinch or tip if things go wrong. Every candle you light feels like a quiet pact. You glow for me, and I'll keep you safe. But the reality monks still got careless, or exhausted, or bold. You hear about one monk who tried to invent a 2-flame candle thinking double the light meant double the productivity. It tipped. It failed. It left a black mark on the choir bench that still hasn't fully faded, a reminder in soot. One evening, as you help clean the scriptorium, a monk knocks a candlestick over with his sleeve. It hits the floor. The flame stays alive, lands on a scroll. The panic is immediate. You rush forward with your cloth, press it down, heart hammering. Brother Luminarum follows with a copper bucket of sand, dumping it over the parchment like it's sacred water. It smells like scorched leather and holy near miss. The scroll is ruined, but the building is saved. No one speaks for a while. Later, the abbot gives a sermon on the dual nature of fire, how it brings light, but only under control. How monks must mirror it, bright, useful, contained. That night, you find yourself staring at your candle with different eyes. Not a timekeeper, not a cozy bedtime companion, a danger, one you've invited willingly into your room. You try to imagine life here without candles. You can't. Without them, time unravels. The hours blur. The darkness wins. Still, every flicker now carries a whisper of warning. You start noticing the architecture differently. The stone floors so cold underfoot, double as flame breaks. The narrow hallways easy to close off, the scattered sand buckets. Always within reach, Even the deep windowsills you love so much were designed with fire in mind, far from drapes, away from beds, just wide enough to hold a single flame safely. Candle placement is deliberate, measured, ritualized. There's a rule: to never leave a flame alone, not even for a moment. You test this once, step out for a breath of air, forgetting you left your candle burning beside your cot. You're gone for 60 seconds. When you return, Brother Felix is there, smothering it with his sleeve, eyes full of disappointment. He doesn't say a word. You don't need him to. You carry the guilt like singed linen for days. And yet, despite all the risk, despite the countless hours of vigilance and ruin, narrowly avoided, the monks never switched to oil lamps, never abandoned the wax, never trade fire for something safer, because the candle is more than light. It's a ritual, a teacher, a mirror. It burns, and it teaches caution. It glows, and it demands care. It melts, and it reminds you that time, like fire, is precious, fleeting, and never entirely under your control. You sit that night with a new candle, freshly trimmed, your linen cloth nearby. You don't sleep just yet. You keep watch, a silent vigil of flame and breath and steady hands. And in that flickering quiet, you realize you're not afraid of the fire. You just respect it. It's 2:45. Not that you have a clock to prove it. You just feel it. Your body has learned to track time in waves, not in hours and minutes, but in candle lengths, bell echoes, and breath patterns. And by now, you've sunk so deeply into the monastic rhythm that you wake just before your candle's first pin is supposed to fall. It's not a superpower, it's just practice. You lie there for a moment, cocooned in wool and silence, watching the flame flicker at the edge of your vision. You know it by heart, the way it curls when the room is warm, dances when the wind sneaks under the door, leans toward the chapel when the early drafts begin rolling through. Your candle drops its first pin. Plink. You rise without groaning. You stretch. You walk slowly. Everything you do now moves in rhythm. This is the secret of monastic life. It trains your body to move with time, not against it. You no longer chase the clock. You ride it like a current. Welcome to the world of polyphasic sleep. Centuries before the term was invented, modern productivity gurus talk about the Uberman schedule, 20-minute naps spaced evenly across the day. Monks. They were doing something similar, minus the sunglasses and YouTube thumbnails. You get up at midnight for matins, nap until dawn, another nap after sext, sometimes a doze after vespers, a patchwork of sleep that somehow keeps you functioning. Historians still debate whether monks thrived under this pattern or simply tolerated it. Was their sleep efficient, holy, or just interrupted suffering with a hymnal soundtrack? Honestly, some days, it's all three. You shuffle into the chapel and find your usual spot. The wooden bench is as unforgiving as ever, but your spine no longer protests. You sit like you were born to it. Maybe you were. The chant begins, low, soft, rhythmic. It wraps around you like fog. One voice starts, then another joins, then another. It's not perfect harmony, more like time rendered in sound. You don't sing to finish the chant. You sing to hold the hour. And somehow, this does something to your sleep cycle. You're no longer groggy at odd hours. You don't dread the midnight bell. Your naps come quickly and leave you restored. You even start predicting when your candle will burn through to the next pin. Within a minute or two, it's spooky, or impressive, or both. Brother Felix calls it monastic muscle memory. You find that there are hot sleep spots, two places in the abbey where naps just hit different: the stone alcove by the cloister garden, the hay pile in the stable loft, the warm bench behind the candle workshop where the air smells like lavender and honey, and nobody ever finds you unless they're looking for wax. You nap there once between sext and nun and wake up to a bee hovering over your nose. You both seem startled. Some monks sleep with candles burning by their beds, not for timing, just for comfort. One brother swears it keeps away demons. Another says it helps him focus his dreams. You try it once, keeping a tiny wax stub beside you as you rest. The flame casts dancing shadows on the wall. and you swear one of them bows before vanishing into the ceiling. You sleep deeply that night. When you ask the abbot about this strange peace, the ease with which you now drift in and out of sleep like a leaf on a stream, he smiles, because sleep here is part of the ritual. He says, not a break from prayer, a form of it. That sticks with you. Sleep isn't a failure to stay awake. It's a return, a surrender. And the candles, they don't just tell you when to sleep. They give you permission. One day, you wake before the bell. No dream, no noise, just readiness. You sit up and realize you don't need a candle to tell you anymore, but you light it anyway. Because even though your body knows the rhythm now, you still love the glow, the ceremony of it, the way the flame seems to whisper, you're right on time. You walk through the abbey, passing monks still curled under cloaks, candles flickering at their sides. You don't disturb them. You just move quietly to the chapel, where the flame waits for you. One notch has burned. 2 remain. You sit, and the silence settles around you like warm wool. Time doesn't tick. It drips, and your body, blessed and broken in equal measure, knows exactly how to follow it. The candle is nearly gone. It's one of the shorter ones, your midday marker, but even so, watching it curl down to the final inch feels symbolic. You sit beside it, legs crossed, head gently bowed. As the flame begins to droop, the wax base pools in delicate spirals. It's hypnotic, and it makes you think of all the monks you've met here, each of them with their own flame, their own rhythm, because while the rules are strict, the schedules aren't identical, not completely. This is the surprise that sneaks up on you. Not all monks slept the same. Some lived by the traditional Benedictine structure, rigid, polyphasic, broken into fragments, but other orders, they had their own styles. The Cistercians, for example, were known to allow longer rest periods, at least compared to the sleep microdoses of your current abbey. You recall a brief visit to a neighboring monastery, where the monks divided their rest into 3 larger chunks: an early nap after Compline, a longer stretch after Matins, and a short doze in the afternoon. That place felt looser. The chants were slower, the bread a bit fluffier, the candles were fewer, but they burned brighter. You also met a brother from a Carthusian house who claimed they only slept in shifts, some monks resting while others kept silent vigil, cycling around the clock. He called it divine coverage. You couldn't tell if he was serious or just sleep-deprived beyond salvation. Historians still debate which orders had the most humane sleep practices. Some records suggest certain monks got a full 6 hours a night, luxurious by medieval standards. Others seem to have operated on willpower, ritual, and sheer spiritual stubbornness. You think back to a peculiar case Brother Luminarum told you about, an isolated hermit monk who slept standing up, leaning into a wall with a candle burning beside his ear. When it reached the brass pin, it would fall, landing on a tiny bell suspended next to his head. Wake-up call, medieval edition. Is that true, you asked? Brother Luminarum just smiled and said, truth and tradition aren't always the same thing. Even in your own abbey, the differences are subtle but clear. Some monks nap during scriptorium breaks. Others drink vinegar water to stay alert. One particularly wiry monk takes micro-rests, closing his eyes for 3 breaths between verses. He swears it's effective. You're unconvinced. You try it once. It feels like trying to sleep during a sneeze. But what unites everyone, no matter their method, is the candles. Even the monks who don't use them for timing still keep them nearby. Lit for prayer, lit for memory, lit for companionship. Each flame holds a unique purpose. Brother Felix uses a thick, slow-burning candle during his long afternoon meditations. It has no marks. He doesn't want to know how much time has passed. He says that if you're watching the clock, you're not really meditating. Meanwhile, the younger monks prefer precise notches every 30 minutes mapped out, pins positioned, even tiny labels in Latin written along the base. You once peeked at one and saw the words "Sibum parare," Prepare food burned into the wax. You chuckled. Even monks need reminders when it's time to eat. The abbot, of course, doesn't need candles anymore. He claims his body knows the hours by instinct. You believe him. He always arrives in the chapel exactly as the final pin falls, as if summoned by the smoke. You wonder if, years from now, you'll develop that kind of internal compass. Already, your naps feel less chaotic, your wake-ups smoother. Even your dreams seem to follow a schedule. You've stopped craving long sleep. You've started craving rest that fits, like puzzle pieces of peace placed between prayers. One night, you join an older monk, Brother Matthias, for what he calls a wandering vigil. It's not official, not required. He just walks the cloisters after Compline, candle in hand, whispering prayers to the stones. You follow. He says little, just shows you quiet corners, half-lit alcoves, rooms that hold memory like incense. One candle, two bodies, and a lot of silence. When he finally speaks, it's this. We don't all sleep the same, but we all wake for the same reason. You don't ask what he means. You don't need to. By the time your candle burns down to the final notch, you're back in your cot, not tired but ready. You hold the flame a moment longer. Let it flicker. Let it mark the end of one rhythm and the start of another. You don't count the minutes. You just breathe. And let time melt around you. You light your last candle before dawn. It's thin, almost humble. No pins, no fancy markings, just a plain beeswax stick, steady and golden in the cold pre-morning air. You set it in a clay dish on the windowsill, where it reflects faintly in the dark glass. One final flame, flickering softly as the world turns. It's strange how quickly this rhythm became normal. A week ago, you measured time in digital numbers, deadlines, phone alarms. Now, you watch wax disappear and call it a schedule. You pull your cloak tighter, listening to the slow hiss of the wick. The candle doesn't rush, doesn't panic. It simply burns. A little quieter now, a little steadier. And it takes you with it. You think back to everything you've seen. The way monks gently trimmed their wicks like gardeners tending a holy flame. The way pins plinked into bowls, marking moments with soft metallic sighs. The way even a failed candle, a collapsed, crooked mess still counted time. However imperfectly, time, here, was never perfect. It was personal. You remember your first candle clock, how you stared at each notch like it was a finish line? Now, you barely notice the markings. You've learned to feel time, not chase it. You've learned to trust the silence, to trust yourself. And the monks, they're still moving to their quiet choreography. You hear sandals in the corridor, the gentle clatter of a wooden spoon, a hymn hummed under someone's breath. No one's rushing, no one's late. Not really, because here time doesn't command. It invites. You notice something else, too. You're not just following the candles anymore. You're part of them, part of the flow. You know when to rise, when to pray, when to eat, when to lie still and let the wax run its course. You even find yourself whispering to your candles now. Not in words, in breath, in stillness, as if saying, I see you. I'm here. Historians still debate why the candle clock system lasted so long, why monks stuck to it even when mechanical timekeeping became cheaper, more accessible. Some say it was tradition, others say it was practicality. But maybe it was something deeper, something no tick or chime could replace. Because a candle doesn't tell you the time, it shares it with you. You sit by the window a little longer, your candle nearing its end. The sky is shifting. A soft gray breaks over the hills. Not sunrise, not yet, but the promise of it. The candlelight meets the coming light like two hands gently passing a baton. The flame gutters once, then again, and finally, without drama, without fuss, it dies. The wick curls into itself. The smoke rises like breath in winter. You sit in the stillness after, not needing more light, just letting the dark stay a little longer. In a world so obsessed with measuring time to the millisecond, these monks chose instead to melt it, to burn it slowly, reverently, quietly, and now so do you. You stand, you stretch, you walk back toward the chapel. No bell rings, no pin falls, but you're right on time. And now, the candles are out. The bells are quiet. The monks have folded into their cloaks, drifting like shadows into simple straw beds. You've left the cloister behind, but part of you still walks those halls barefoot on stone, guided by flickering gold. Let the rhythm stay with you, just a little longer. Let your own breath rise and fall like the wax that once dripped beside your cot. You don't need to think, or plan, or race toward anything. Not yet. Right now, all you have to do is melt. Let the body soften. Let the mind go dim. There's no flame to watch, no pin to fall, no obligation, but rest. The monks will keep their vigil. The hours will pass without you. That's okay. You're not missing anything. You're just stepping out of time for a while. Feel the warmth in your chest from that last candle, the one that burned slow, not to mark a task, but to remind you that even in darkness, there's beauty. Let that flame flicker one last time in your imagination, then fade. Wax to ash, chant to silence, thought to dream. You're safe, you're still, and for once, there's nothing left to do. Good night.